It was supposed to be a quiet family dinner. Candles, laughter, and my daughter's favorite pie, cooling on the counter. I'd saved her the seat beside me, the one she used to climb into when she was little. But when she walked in, she didn't even look at me. She looked at her mother-in-law and said, "This seat's for her, not you." The room went still. I smiled, the kind of smile you wear when your heart forgets how. That night, I learned there's nothing colder than being a guest at your own table. Before the story begins, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Clara Whitlow, 63 years old, widowed, and, until last night, confident I knew where my place was at my own table. I have a small house with a porch that keeps the afternoon sun like a promise, and a dining room that has heard every version of my daughter's laugh, from infant hiccups to grown woman politeness. I set the fork to the left, the napkin folded in the way my mother taught me, and the candles low so nobody feels examined. If my life has a shape, it's a table set for the people I love. I raised Sophie mostly on casseroles and patience. She is 32 now, newly married to a kind man named Peter, who carries worry in his shoulders the way men often do when they want to be good and aren't sure how to prove it. Sophie is tall, luminous when she's excited, and careful with her words when she's not. She has a way of smoothing the air between people, unless she's tired or unless she's torn between loyalties. Marriage will do that to you. It will hand you two centers and ask you to orbit both, and it won't tell you what to do when gravity disagrees. I speak softly these days. Grief taught me how. My husband, Walter, had been gone 7 years, and I've learned to live like a person who can carry her own groceries and also talk to the apples because the house is quieter than it should be. I don't expect apologies from anyone anymore. People are doing their best, or their best for themselves, which looks the same from far away. I keep my voice low, my temper cooler than the tea I let sit too long, and I let the young folks believe they invented compromise. When Sophie told me she wanted to come over for dinner, just us and Peter and maybe his mom, if that's okay, I said yes with the kind of warmth I reserve for things I wish were simple. Of course it was okay. Of course her mother-in-law should come. I know about blending. I know about showing your daughter without saying it out loud that you can share her with the world and not come apart at the seams. I made my grocery list on the back of an old envelope. Sophie's favorite roast chicken with lemon and thyme, mashed potatoes whipped until clouds gave up their secrets, green beans with garlic and almonds because crunch keeps the conversation honest, and a pie, blueberry, because she was a summer baby who believed sugar could fix anything. I polished the silver that morning, not because anyone but me would notice, but because sometimes your hands need to remember the difference between dull and bright. I put the good tablecloth on, the one Walter spilled wine on at our 25th anniversary. The stain is a ghost only I can see. I set 4 plates. Then, on a second thought I couldn't explain, I set 5. Old habits put both my grief and my hospitality on autopilot. Around 5, the neighborhood quieted the way it does when people go indoors and become families. I turned on the radio low, old standards, the kind that sound like they were recorded in a room with wood floors and patient air. The chicken went into the oven. The house took on that smell, citrus, warmth, the idea of safety. I set Sophie's seat beside mine, the way I always have for occasions that matter. When she was little, She would climb up before Grace and swing her legs like bell ropes, impatient for permission to be loud. When she was 13, she sat tight-lipped and brave, picking at her food while her first heartbreak tried to outrun the salt in her eyes. At 20, she came home from college with opinions sharpened like pencils and sat there to test them on me. We sharpened each other gently, because that's what good women do when they know knives aren't just for cutting. By 6, the pie was cooling on the counter, the lattice shiny as though it had its own thoughts. I lit 2 candles and left the third unlit in case the heat made conversation drowsy. Light is a language in a small room. Too much is interrogation. Too little is confession. They were late by 10 minutes. 10 minutes is not a sin, but it does something to a person who has been waiting. It turns the clock into a spotlight and the cook into a witness. The front door opened with a careful knock that people use when they don't want to sound like they live there. I wiped my hands on my apron and went to greet them. Sophie came in first, smiling the smile she uses for polite rooms, soft, practiced, a little too bright at the edges. She hugged me with a quickness that said we were on a schedule, and behind her came Peter, carrying flowers like an apology for the time he didn't owe me, and Elaine, his mother, who arrived with a casserole I did not need and a perfume that found the corners of the house before her voice did. "Mom," Sophie said, and then, "Elaine, this is my mother, Clara." She said it like an introduction at a work thing, competent, brisk, as though the words had been rehearsed in the car. Elaine shook my hand and called me dear, the way women do when they are deciding whether to mother you or manage you. She is near my age, maybe a year or 2 younger, with hair that takes heat well, and a gaze that inventories a room in one pass. She smiled and told me my home was cozy, a word that holds both affection and advice. We moved toward the dining room in that small parade families make when they're not sure who leads yet. I saw Sophie glance at the table and, reflexively, at the chair beside mine. She paused. It was a pause you could almost miss if you didn't know her bones. Then she said, gently, with that same work meeting voice, "Mom, could Elaine sit here? I want her next to me tonight." I heard the words, but not their meaning at first. I think my heart wears earmuffs when it's about to snow. The house went quieter than quiet. Even the radio understood and dimmed itself. I smiled because muscles have memory, and my smile has a lifetime of practice saying it's fine when a thing is not fine at all. "Of course," I said. "Of course she should." I moved my napkin and my fork to the other side with a small choreography that wanted to look like grace. The chair legs rasped against the floor, a sound like someone clearing their throat before telling the truth. I told myself it was only a chair, only a seating choice, only an evening. If you were there, you might not have seen anything happen, but something did. It was quiet, the way most changes are when they've been rehearsing backstage for years. A mother can feel when a center shifts. It's a tremor in the cutlery, a draft where there used to be a wall. We sat. Sophie took the chair at the head out of habit. I always put her there on birthdays so she'd learn how to hold attention and not fear it. To her right, now, sat Elaine, who folded her napkin perfectly in her lap and looked around like she was mapping exits and hopes. Peter sat opposite me, strategic as a bridge between people who love him in different languages. I took the seat a little farther away than usual. the one that faces the window and lets me look out when the room gets overcrowded with ideas. I asked about the drive, and they told me about a detour near the river. I asked about work, and Peter said he's learning to like spreadsheets, the way you learn to like the in-laws' casserole. Elaine complimented the pie crust. Sophie touched my hand and said, "It smells like home." The words landed kind, but they also landed tired, as though home belonged to a time now being repainted. From the kitchen, the chicken announced itself done. I excused myself and checked the skin, crisp and promising. I spooned pan juices into a small gravy boat Walter bought me in a shop where the owner said every dish had a story. The gravy boat story is that it is never spilled, not once, even when my hands shook after the funeral. I carried the platter out with the care of someone balancing food and feeling at the same time. Elaine offered to carve. She asked it like a kindness and like a test. "If you don't mind, Clara, I've had practice with Peter's father all those years." I minded, but my face is trained. I nodded and handed her the knife. Her nails were neat, the knife steady. She carved with a competence that made the bird look smaller, as if certainty shrinks a thing. Sophie watched us both with that good daughter alertness, the kind that tries to keep levity afloat with gentle hands. "Mom, you always get the wings, right?" she said. "Elaine likes the breast." I nodded and said, "Everyone gets what they like," and meant it even as something in my chest measured how much everyone liked and where I fit in that math. We ate the way families eat when ceremony and appetite share the table. Compliments passed like salt. Jokes were short, safe, and well-behaved. The chair beside Sophie, the one that was supposed to be mine, was warm with someone else's intentions. I kept my voice even and my eyes kind. 63 buys you the right to choose peace over point scoring. It also buys you the clarity to know when you're counting losses in teaspoons instead of ladles. "Peter says you're thinking about selling the house," Elaine said, casual as a cat stretching. She sipped her water and watched me as if the answer were a card face down. "It's a seller's market." Before I could answer, Sophie touched Elaine's arm. "Mom's just considering," she said, and the word mom stretched between us like a bridge that needed inspection. 2 women, 1 title. The room didn't wobble, but I did. I told them I wasn't sure, that it's a lot of house for one person, but the walls hold so much music I'd hate to evict it. Elaine nodded like a woman who knows about equity. Peter said they could help me look at numbers. Sophie said nothing, which is often what a person says when she's stacking loyalties and praying they don't topple. I brought out the pie. Blueberries glittered like a small night sky on a plate. I cut slices generous enough to forgive a world's worth of little shames. As I set a piece in front of Sophie, she smiled, and for a second, there she was again. 9 years old, blue-lipped, telling me I put too much sugar and she loved me for it. Then the moment corrected itself, and she was 32, married, careful. "Mom," she said, my name for me, not Elaine's. "Would you mind if we offered the extra seat at the next holiday to Elaine's sister? She'll be in town and—" She trailed off. Words are good at escaping right before they commit treason. "Of course," I said. "I have so many of courses I could open a store. I could line them up on shelves, dust them, and donate them when the season turns." We finished dessert with the kind of small sighs people make when they want to put a period on a sentence that deserves a paragraph. I started gathering plates. Elaine stood to help and insisted I sit. "You've done enough," she said. It was kind. It was also a subtle rearranging of who gets to be useful. Sophie hesitated, then followed Elaine to the kitchen with plates in her hands and duty in her gait. I stayed seated and looked at my hands as if they belonged to a woman I was still meeting. From the sink, water ran and voices softened. They were not secrets. They were just quieter than my memory of Sophie and me standing shoulder to shoulder, rinsing and stacking, trading the day in laughable pieces. Peter sat across from me and, bless him, tried to start a conversation about baseball. I nodded. The radio found a song Walter used to sway me to after dishes. The room adjusted its weight to accommodate an absence that had had plenty of practice. When they came back, it was time to say goodnight, because evenings have a way of ending when they realize they cannot repair themselves. At the door, Elaine kissed the air near my cheek and thanked me for a lovely meal. Sophie hugged me longer than when she'd arrived, longer and closer, and in that hold I felt apology and obligation and love braided together so tightly the rope creaked. "Text me when you're home," I said into her hair, because some lines never retire. "We will," she promised. "I love you." "I know," I said, "and I do." Love is not the question. It's the arithmetic around it that keeps changing. After the taillights left the street, I came back to the dining room to blow out the candles. The chair beside mine, my chair, was a simple shape in the lamplight, innocent as furniture. I touched the back of it the way you touch a gravestone you're not ready to read. Then I moved it 2 inches back to where I had set it before. It was nothing, of course. It was also everything. I washed the dishes alone. I do not mind the sink's company. It is honest work. The gravy boat did not spill. The stain on the tablecloth kept its history to itself. The house exhaled. When the counters were clean and the pie reduced to 2 triangles arranged like a quiet argument, I made a cup of tea, chamomile, because chamomile never asks you to be more than you are. I sat at the table with my cup and the dark, and I let the evening tell itself to me like a child trying to fall asleep. I replayed the moment with the chair. I replayed my smile, the one that tries to make other people comfortable even when the cushion under it has thorns. I thought about the way Sophie's eyes slid to Elaine for approval before they slid to me for love. I thought about the mathematics of place, who sits where, who speaks first, who carves. If you ask me what hurt, I will tell you it wasn't the sentence itself. This seat's for her, not you. It was the practice hidden inside it, the way the choice arrived already decided, as if it had been decided in rooms I don't live in. It was the discovery that I had moved, not out of her love, but out of the center of her arrangements. The center is a delicate place. You don't notice you've left it until the light looks different. On the pad by the phone, I wrote a list because lists make grief measurable. Dinner, fine. Chair, no. Sophie, tired, pulled. Elaine, competent, kind, territorial. Me, still learning. I stared at those words until they arranged themselves into a surrender I could live with for the night. Before bed, I went back to the dining room and straightened the chairs. All of them. I am not superstitious, but I do believe in the small order of things. Chairs face tables, forks attend plates, mothers love daughters, daughters grow and love outward. Somewhere between those truths, there is a seat for me that does not have to be the one at her elbow to count. Still, I am human. I stood there a while with my hand on the chair that wasn't mine tonight and let myself feel the bruise without naming it. Then I turned off the lamp and the room took the dark without complaint, the way rooms do when they have seen you through worse and still trust the sunrise to find you. In bed, I lay on my side and listened to the house settle, the heater click, a distant car deciding its direction. I thought about the next dinners, the next holidays, the next small arrangements that say louder things than their size. I thought about asking for my place, about insisting, about explaining that history is not an heirloom you can put in a different cabinet and expect it to mean the same. But I also thought about Sophie at 23, calling me from a job she hated, whispering in a bathroom stall because tears don't like offices. I thought about her at 6, chewing her lip, trying to read the word because. I thought about her at 32, trying to please 2 mothers, and I forgave her for the sentence she chose tonight because I have said similar sentences in other rooms for other reasons, and someone forgave me too. I fell asleep with my hand open on the sheet, as if holding a place. In the morning, I poured coffee, fed the sparrows stale bread, and looked at the table in daylight. It was only wood and stitches and the memory of heat. But I have learned that what is only can also be everything, depending on the hour and the ache. I straightened the runner. I set a single plate. I sat where the sun could find me, and for the first time since I became a mother, I asked myself a new question. Where is the seat I choose when no one is choosing for me? I don't know the answer yet, but I know this. Last night didn't break me. It moved me. And being moved at 63 is not the same as being erased. It might be the beginning of a different kind of place, a place I make, not one I am granted. Still, when my phone chimed with a text from Sophie, home, love you, thank you for dinner, I felt the ache turn its face toward the window like a plant. Love is stubborn, and so am I. I texted back, always. Sleep well. Then I set my cup in the sink and decided to call her later, when the words could come out steady and kind, not less true, just kind, because there's a conversation coming about chairs and centers and how a woman leaves her mother without leaving her. But that is for later. For now, the house is quiet, and I am in it, and the table is set for one. And I am learning how to sit with that without feeling like I am waiting. I have stopped expecting an apology. That leaves more room for the truth. The morning after that dinner, the house looked the same, but everything inside it had shifted half an inch to the left. I noticed it in the way the chairs didn't quite face each other anymore, in the quiet that sat heavier than usual. Even the clock ticked differently, as if it too was reconsidering its rhythm. On the counter, I found the napkin Elaine had used folded with military precision. It was the kind of neatness that announces itself. I was here, and I was careful. A faint perfume lingered on the cotton, roses and something faintly metallic, like determination. I stood there longer than I meant to, holding that napkin like evidence in a case I didn't want to open. When Sophie called that evening, her voice came bright and careful. "Dinner was wonderful, Mom," she said. "Peter and Elaine couldn't stop talking about your pie." She hesitated, a flutter of static on the line. "Elaine said she'd love your recipe." I laughed the laugh I reserve for gentle lies. It's no secret, just butter, sugar, and patience. The rest depends on who you bake it for. Another pause, then softly, "She also thought maybe next time we could host, Give you a break. A break. I imagined my hands idle, my kitchen quiet. I imagined a table without my fingerprints on it. That's sweet of her, I said, but cooking doesn't tire me. It reminds me I still matter. By the end of the call, something invisible had changed shape between us. The connection hummed with static that wasn't from the phone. I said goodnight and stood for a long while by the sink, watching the streetlight quiver against the window pane. The house felt polite. I've learned that's lonelier than silence. A week later, Sophie texted a picture of her new dining set. White wood, 6 matching chairs, a soft rug underneath like a promise of permanence. Elaine helped me pick it, she wrote. Isn't it perfect? It was beautiful, clinical in its symmetry. I typed lovely, then deleted and retyped it twice before sending. I didn't add, but you already had my table. The oak one Walter and I bought the year Sophie turned 10, the one she used to color on, hiding crayon marks under her elbow when she thought I couldn't see. I had given it to her when she moved out, and she'd said she'd keep it forever. But forever, I'm learning, has the lifespan of furniture. That Sunday, she texted again. We're having brunch. Come if you'd like. Elaine's making quiche, if I'd like. Such small words, such careful distance. But I went because love is an instinct you can't reason out of your bones. Their house smelled like cinnamon and ambition. Elaine's laughter reached me before her face did, round and well-trained. Peter opened the door, visibly relieved I'd come. Clara, so good you're here. Sophie appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, flower on her cheek, apron crisp. Mom, you found it all right? She said. I've been finding things all my life, I told her. The table was already set, 6 plates, polished silver, a vase of lilies whose fragrance made the air a little too rich. Elaine sat at the head, casual as someone who'd practiced. Sophie guided me toward a chair. Sit here, Mom. It's easier for you to reach everything. Easier. I sat. The cushion gave under me, new and firm, not yet molded to anyone's history. Conversation flowed politely. Elaine recounted a story about her garden club. Sophie's laughter fluttered on cue. I added small words at the right intervals. Yes, how lovely, isn't that nice? The orchestra of civility has no percussion, only strings, played softly enough to muffle feeling. When the quiche arrived, Elaine served it with ceremony. Sophie insisted I use your recipe for the crust, she said, voice sweetened with self-congratulation, though mine's a bit flakier. I smiled, keeping my hands folded. Flaky is good, I said. Edges should crumble a little. It makes what's left hold together better. Peter laughed, not quite sure why. Sophie reached under the table and touched my hand. Briefly, gently, an apology wrapped in reflex. But apologies need a place to land. Her fingers slipped away before mine could close. Afterward, we moved to the living room. The sun through the blinds striped the floor in alternating truths. Elaine complimented a vase Sophie had found. Isn't it charming? We picked it up last weekend at that antique store on Maple. That's the one I used to take you to, I said, my voice too soft for the room's brightness. Sophie blinked and nodded quickly. Right, Mom. The owner remembered you. Elaine added, we should all go together sometime. Perhaps, I said, though nostalgia takes up more space in a car than people think. They laughed, uncertain. I smiled to make it safe for them. When I left, Elaine hugged me, proper, perfumed, brief. Sophie walked me to the door. Mom, she really means well, she said. She just likes being involved. I can see that, I said. She's very practiced." Sophie frowned. "Don't be like that." "Like what?" I asked. "Observant?" She kissed my cheek and said, "I'll call you tomorrow." I nodded. Tomorrow has its own plans. That night, I wrote in my ledger, "Brunch, Elaine hosted." Sophie glowed. I applauded. Then beneath it, "When did love become a performance?" I made tea and let the questions steep longer than the leaves. The next week, Sophie called again. "Peter's birthday dinner," she said, her tone brisk. "Would you bring your roast potatoes? Elaine's making the roast." I almost laughed at the symmetry. "Of course, darling. The potatoes and I will behave." That evening, her house looked even more curated. Candles in glass holders, crystal shining. Elaine greeted me as though she owned the hour. "Clara, you're here. You'll sit beside Peter. Sophie and I will handle serving. It's more fun this way." Fun. I have learned that word is sometimes code, for we've already decided without you. Throughout dinner, the conversation stayed polite and buoyant. Elaine told stories of Peter as a boy, and Sophie filled in details as if reading from a shared script. When dessert came, Peter's favorite chocolate mousse, he raised his glass and said, "To both my moms for making this night perfect." The phrase landed softly and broke something soundless inside me. Sophie's smile faltered. Her eyes found mine. I lifted my glass too and said, "To family, whatever shape it takes." Afterward, Elaine brought out gifts for Peter, including cufflinks engraved with his initials. Sophie handed hers next, an old photo of him and Elaine, newly framed. They laughed over the memory, heads close. I watched, still as a spectator who knew all the lines but none of the cues. When Sophie looked up again, I smiled, not because I felt joy, but because I refused to let bitterness write my face. Later, Sophie walked me out. "Mom, you're quiet tonight." "Quiet is how I keep the peace," I said. "I don't want you to feel replaced." I looked at her, the porch light haloing her hair. "Replaced isn't the right word, sweetheart. It's rearranged. Rooms change when you add new furniture. It's no one's fault if the old chair doesn't fit where it used to." Her eyes shimmered. "You're not an old chair." "I know, but even chairs have feelings about the view." She laughed softly, unsure whether she was allowed to. I kissed her forehead and told her I was proud. That much was true. At home, the house met me with the same faithful silence. I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat at my table, the one no one had asked to replace. The candlelight showed every scratch, every mark of use. Walter once said that furniture holds stories better than people do. Maybe that's why it's heavier. I thought about Sophie, about the way she balanced loyalties like fragile plates, about how often daughters inherit the art of appeasement. I wondered if I had taught her too well. Before bed, I added one more note to my ledger. Elaine means well. So do I. Intentions can bruise even when wrapped in kindness. Then, beneath it, I wrote, "Let go, but not entirely." The kettle whistled. I poured another cup of tea. The steam rose between me and my reflection in the window, blurring the lines just enough to look like two women, one learning to step back, the other learning how not to disappear. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of gray day that sits in the middle of the week, pretending to be harmless. Sophie called in the morning, her voice brisk, practiced. "Mom, could you come by this evening? Peter's at work late, and Elaine's stopping in. We want to talk about something." There was a politeness in her tone that warned me. Conversations that begin this gently rarely end that way. I arrived at 6. The house was warm, too warm, as though they'd tried to make the air comforting. Elaine's car was already in the driveway. Through the window, I saw her and Sophie at the table, papers spread out like a meeting. Not a dinner, a meeting. "Mom!" Sophie greeted me with that same bright edge she used when she was nervous. "Tea or wine?" "Tea," I said, removing my coat. "Wine confuses the truth." Elaine smiled, the way diplomats do before delivering a difficult message. "Clara, we've been talking. Sophie mentioned you've been thinking about selling your house." "I've thought about it," I said. Thinking and doing are different hobbies. Elaine folded her hands. "Of course. It's just Sophie and Peter are hoping to buy soon. It might make sense if your house went to family. Keep it close, you know?" Sophie looked up quickly. "It was just an idea, Mom. The neighborhood's perfect, and we thought maybe it could be a win-win." I nodded slowly. A win for everyone, except the woman being moved out of her memories. "Mom, that's not—" I held up my hand. "Sweetheart, I'm not angry. Just surprised to learn my home is up for adoption." Elaine started to say something about practicality, investment, but Sophie's eyes stopped her. My daughter's eyes, the same color as mine, used to be before time thinned the light in them. "Mom," she said softly, "it's not about taking. It's about sharing. You could move in with us or near us. We'd help. You wouldn't have to worry." I stared at her. I didn't know I was worrying. "Everyone worries," she said, voice almost pleading. "You're alone out there." Alone. The word settled between us like dust. I have been alone before. After Walter died, after Sophie left for college, after the first Thanksgiving I spent reheating silence. But never once did I confuse solitude with vacancy. "I appreciate the concern," I said, "but my life still fits in my house. I still know which drawer holds the teaspoons." Elaine leaned forward. "It's just, sometimes change is good, Clara. You'd be closer to Sophie. To us. The plural of replacement." I smiled, slow and calm. "Elaine, closeness isn't about distance. It's about permission, and I seem to have misplaced mine." Sophie reached for my hand across the table. "Please don't make this a fight." "It's not a fight," I said. "It's just math. You're building a life, and every addition requires a subtraction." Her lip trembled. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I whispered. "You'll just love me from a different room." The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was simply final. I sipped my tea. It had gone cold. The taste reminded me of every apology that waited too long to be said. Elaine stood first, smoothing her blouse. "I'll let you two talk." She gathered her papers, and the click of her heels down the hall sounded like punctuation. Sophie's voice came small. "I didn't mean for it to sound like we were pushing you." I laughed softly, the kind of laugh that breaks on its way out. "Sweetheart, you didn't have to push. I've been moving myself for years to make space for you. I just didn't realize I'd run out of corners." Her tears came fast, and I hated myself for causing them. But truth, once named, refuses to stay polite. "Mom, I just thought—" "I know," I said, standing. "You thought love could live everywhere, and maybe it can. But homes are particular things. They know whose footsteps built them." She followed me to the door. The evening air was cool, honest. "Will you forgive me?" she asked. "There's nothing to forgive," I said. "You're just learning how to choose. And you, I'm learning how to let you." I kissed her cheek, the same way I did when she was a girl, and scraped her knees. Light, certain. knowing it wouldn't fix anything but still doing it anyway. Then I walked to my car. The porch light glowed behind me like a witness. Driving home, the radio played a song Walter used to hum when fixing things. Hands steady, heart stubborn. I turned it up and sang along, quietly off-key, because grief and love share the same chords if you hum long enough. At home, I didn't turn on the lights. The house greeted me with its usual patience. I walked through each room slowly, touching the backs of chairs, the edge of the table, the frame of the door she'd once slammed at 16. Every mark, every scratch, proof of living, proof of staying. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer with the teaspoons just to remind myself I still could. Then I wrote a single sentence in my ledger. Tonight, they offered to buy my house. I said no and meant it. Some walls still know my name. I closed the book, exhaled, and whispered into the dark. I am still here. The Sunday after everything, sunlight came slow, cautious, as if it wanted to make sure it was welcome. I opened the curtains and let it in. The house yawned around me, wood stretching, pipes clearing their throats. I made coffee the way Walter used to, 2 sugars, 1 quiet breath before the first sip. I carried the mug to the porch and watched a sparrow bully the others off the feeder. Life has its pecking orders everywhere. It had been 3 days since the talk with Sophie and Elaine, 3 days since the word no left my lips and settled into the house like furniture that finally found its place. I'd worried the night after that I'd gone too far, that maybe boundaries were just walls by another name. But each morning since, breathing felt a bit easier. There's peace in choosing what to keep. By late morning, my phone buzzed, a text from Sophie. Can I come by? Just me. I answered, always. Bring your appetite for tea and forgiveness. She arrived wearing a sweater I recognized. Mine, from 20 years ago, stretched and faded but still brave enough to be worn. Hi, Mom, she said, eyes soft, voice shy. Hi, sweetheart. The word came out without effort this time. I brewed chamomile and set out 2 cups, the good porcelain. She smiled when she saw it. You never use these. Some things shouldn't wait for company, I said. We sat across from each other, the table between us like a steady old friend. She traced the rim of her cup before speaking. Mom, about the other night, I'm sorry, not just for the house, for everything I didn't see. I waited because mothers learn not to interrupt redemption when it's finally finding its words. I didn't realize how much I was asking you to shrink, she said. Elaine means well, but sometimes I let her fill spaces that already belong to you. I reached across the table and covered her hand. You're not the first person to rearrange love trying to make it fit, and she's not the villain. Time just gives us new furniture, and we spend years bumping our knees on it until we learn the layout. She laughed through her tears. You always make everything sound softer than it is. That's age, darling. It sands down the sharp edges. She leaned back, exhaling. I was scared you'd never come to dinner again. Oh, I'll come, I said. But maybe next time I'll pick my own seat. I've earned that, right? She smiled, real this time. The kind of smile that remembers who taught it. Deal. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about nothing and everything. Her work, my garden, Walter's old records. She helped me trim the roses in the yard just like she used to when she was 8 and thought pruning was cruelty. You have to cut back what you love, I told her then, so it has room to grow. Standing there now, I realized the lesson had waited 24 years to land. Before she left, she hugged me long and hard, the kind of hug that holds both apology and promise. "I love you, Mom." "I know," I said, holding her cheek like I used to when she was feverish. "And I love you without expecting you to stay small for me." After she drove away, the street quieted again. I walked back inside, slower, not out of sadness, but reverence. The afternoon light made the dust in the air look like tiny planets orbiting the furniture. I dusted the mantel, rearranged nothing, and thought about how stillness can be its own kind of progress. Dinner was simple that night. Soup and toast, eaten without ceremony. I turned on Walter's favorite record, the one with a scratch that makes the needle skip in just the right place to surprise you. The house seemed to hum along. Maybe healing is just learning the rhythm of what remains. After washing the dishes, I opened my ledger to a fresh page and wrote, "Today, Sophie came home. We spoke like women who have both learned something about distance. Love did not fade. It stretched." Beneath that, I added, "Some seasons don't end. They unfold into quieter versions of themselves." I closed the book and carried my tea to the porch. The sky was doing that soft blue trick it does before evening, when light forgets which direction to go. I sat and listened to the wind tease the chimes Walter hung 20 years ago. Their sound was thin but steady. It reminded me of us, weathered, imperfect, still singing. I looked at the house next door where lights flickered on, one by one. Someone's laughter carried across the street. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I was simply here, exactly where I was supposed to be. The kettle inside began to whistle again, as if to say it wasn't done talking. I smiled and let it sing. If your child ever made you feel like a guest in the life you built for them, would you speak your truth or stay silent to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done and why?